This man is a responsible American homeowner, gun owner, and protector of his family. Or at least he was. This man and his uniformed friends are irresponsible Americans who had one job: to protect this man's property, family, and life. And not only did they fail miserably, but they successfully terrorized this family and ended this man's life. And years later, a federal judge has now made a ruling on this case. To get everybody quickly up to speed, around 11:30 on Wednesday night in April of 2023, 3 police officers repeatedly knocked on the door of Robert Dotson's house at 5305 Valley View Avenue in Farmington, New Mexico. They were responding to a report of a possible domestic violence situation, but they were in the wrong place. 5308 Valley View Avenue is where they were supposed to be, which was on the opposite side of the street. When they realized that they were at the wrong address, they treated it as a laughing matter.
Farmington Police. 4108. Is it 43 or 5308?
Yeah, it might have been 5308.
Is this not 5308? That's what it said right there, right? 108. Can you 10-9 the address?
5308 Valley View Avenue, had a confidence factor.
Don't tell me I'm wrong.
In fact, they were still laughing when Dotson, a 52-year-old father of 2, came to the door with a gun in his hand to protect his family.
Oh, shit. Hey, hands up!
And the cops shot and killed him. That response, the response of shooting and killing an innocent homeowner, a federal judge in New Mexico ruled last week was, quote, reasonable for the circumstances and therefore did not violate the Dotsons' Fourth Amendment rights. And just to let you know, I'm not the one blurring out these cops' faces. These guys killed an innocent homeowner, knowing they were at the wrong address, and the judge says that Dotson's Fourth Amendment rights were not violated. The Fourth Amendment that says you have an unalienable right to be secure in your person. The person these guys eliminated. U.S. District Judge Matthew Garcia writes in response to a federal civil rights lawsuit that Dotson's family filed in September of 2023 that the officers, quote, reasonably believed that Dotson posed a severe risk of imminent harm to them. Judge Garcia rejected the plaintiff's argument that the officers, Daniel Estrada, Dylan Goodluck, and Waylon Wasson, quote, recklessly created the need to apply deadly force by going to the wrong address. Garcia did concede, though, that the cops' conduct prior to the shooting was, quote, not a paragon of careful police work. That has to be the judicial understatement of the year. When the cops were dispatched to 5308 Valley View Avenue, Judge Garcia notes Wasson, quote, utilized his service vehicle's mobile data terminal to locate the address, incorrectly placing the house on the right or south side of the street. Meanwhile, Officer Goodluck, who is in a separate vehicle, quote, searched Google Maps to locate the property, and that search correctly located the house as being situated on the left or north side of Valley View Avenue. When the officers arrived on the scene, Goodluck, quote, continued to question whether they were headed to the correct residence. Garcia says, but he deferred to Officer Wasson's seniority and said nothing. After Wasson knocked on the front door of Dotson's house 3 times without getting a response, Goodluck, quote, finally voiced his concern that the defendant officers went to the wrong address. Pointing across the street, he said, quote, it might have been 5308, right there. Wasson was puzzled and said, is this not 5308? That's what it said right there, right? No, Goodluck replied. This is 5305, isn't it? Wasson then asked the dispatcher to confirm the correct address. And after the dispatcher said 5308 Valley View, Wasson jokingly said, "Don't tell me I'm wrong, Dylan." By this point, the plaintiffs say the cops were, quote, realizing they were at the wrong address and were laughing about it. According to the lawsuit, Dotson and his wife Kimberly were upstairs in their bedroom when Wasson knocked on the front door. The complaint says, quote, the knock was not loud and his announcement, Farmington Police, could not be heard on the second story. The police vehicles were parked down the street and did not have their lights on. But the couple believed they heard the knock, so Dotson put on his robe and went downstairs. For personal protection, he picked up the handgun which was kept on top of the refrigerator in the Dotson residence, not knowing what he might encounter at that late hour. I just want to say, it's never a good idea to open your front door when you don't know who's on the other side of it during the day, let alone at nighttime. Never open your door when you don't know who's there. And you especially never want to open the door when it's the police. They're way too scared to ever be trusted. According to the lawsuit, when Dotson opened his front door, he was blinded by police flashlights. At that point, the police did not announce themselves, and Dotson had no idea who was in his yard shining bright lights at him. According to the lawsuit, Wasson, upon seeing Dotson's gun, opened fire immediately, and the other officers, Estrada and Goodluck, immediately followed by firing their guns. Robert Dotson was struck by 12 of those rounds. According to the lawsuit, hearing the shots, Kimberly Dotson rushed downstairs and saw her husband laying in his own blood in the doorway. She still didn't know what had happened or that police officers were in her front yard. She fired outside at whoever had shot her husband, and the officers each fired at Mrs. Dotson another 19 rounds.
You good?
Yeah,
back up, back up, back up. Check yourself, check yourself.
I'm good.
We're 10-4. We're going to back up a little bit. Back up, back up, back up.
Here, 10-4 backing.
Hey, he went down.
Hey,
Copy, you have one down.
I got you covered. Move, move. Let's move out. Hands up!
Please don't. Man! 4115, we need units now.
Fortunately, she wasn't hit. At that point, according to the complaint, the officers finally announced themselves, and Kimberly Dotson told them that someone had shot her husband and requested their help. The complaint says, quote, she did not realize even at that moment that 3 police officers had killed her husband, which she didn't even learn until she was finally told 8 hours later at the police station where she was detained. The lawsuit says after the shooting, the officers involved did not disclose to investigators that they were at the wrong address, which was the error leading to the tragic result, and without which it would not have occurred. The mistake was discovered by other officers who arrived at the scene. Now, Garcia offers a somewhat different account in his order, dismissing the Fourth Amendment claims. He said, quote, Dotson held a firearm in his right hand. Without warning, Dotson placed both hands on his firearm and raised it in the direction of officers Wasson and Estrada. The defendant officers perceived Dotson to present an imminent threat to their safety. Garcia continues, Wasson shouted to Dotson, "Hey, hands up!" At the same time, Dotson raised his firearm parallel to the ground and pointed it in officers Wasson and Estrada's direction. Officer Wasson fired his service weapon. Officers Estrada and Goodluck fired as well. Garcia notes that, quote, just 2 seconds elapsed from the moment Dotson opened his front door to the time the defendant officers shot him. The officers therefore, quote, had insufficient time to de-escalate the encounter without risking their safety. But by the same token, Mr. Dotson had insufficient time to understand what was happening. Now, Garcia noted that the plaintiffs argue that Dotson, quote, was likely blinded by a flashlight and had little reason to know that police were at his home and not some would-be assailant. But Judge Garcia dismisses that argument as, quote, largely speculative, saying, quote, there is nothing in the record to substantiate plaintiff's suggestion that Dotson was blinded and was unaware of who was knocking at his door. Nothing in the record? How can video evidence of a blinding light shining in Robert's face be largely speculative? If it wasn't so tragic, this would be laughable. You know, Judge Garcia saw this same video that we're looking at. Video evidence proves he was being blinded by officer flashlights. It's hardly plausible to think that Dotson, who was at home with his wife and their 2 children, knew the men at his door were police officers, but decided to go ahead and threaten him with a gun anyway. Nobody in their right mind would do that. Further, Garcia says what really matters is that Wasson and his irresponsible and dangerous Blue Line gang members reasonably perceived Dotson as posing a potential deadly threat. According to Judge Garcia, the fact that Dotson would still be alive but for the officer's carelessness and going to the wrong house, a mistake that not only could have been recognized before Wasson knocked on the door, but was in fact recognized by Officer Goodluck, does not affect the Fourth Amendment analysis. Garcia wrote, quote, the officers did not violate the Fourth Amendment by merely showing up at Dotson's home, and though the defendant officer's error was the reason they ended up at Dotson's residence, that mistake was not the factor precipitating their use of force. What video is this judge talking about? This man is a federal judge who holds the trajectory of people's lives in his hands, and any reasonable, semi-intelligent person understands that when a stranger is making noises at your front door close to midnight, pretty much everybody, including Judge Garcia, would assume that the people making the noise are a threat, and that threat necessitates the use of force to repel. So Garcia endorsed the position that the officer's lawyer, Louis Robles, took. Quote, this case is undeniably tragic, not only for the Dotson family, but also for the officers. The officers didn't go to the Dotson house with any intention to use deadly force, but because Mr. Dotson pointed a gun at the officers, that gave them no other choice but to shoot him. They have everything backwards. It's the cops that gave Dotson no other choice but to protect his family. They were the trespassers. They were the potential intruders. They were the assailants. They are the ones who knew they were at the wrong address. The cops are the ones who initiated what everybody else sees as the appropriate, reasonable response from a homeowner who has no idea who the threat is. Just that there is a threat, and he's the only one standing between that threat and his family. Ironically, Garcia issued his decision on the same day that the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that assessing the use of deadly force requires consideration of more than, quote, the moment of the threat. The justices determined that that narrow approach, which had been adopted by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, was inconsistent with the principle that the constitutionality of deadly force depends on the totality of the circumstances. But the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th District, which includes New Mexico, had already said that analysis requires considering whether, quote, reckless or deliberate conduct during the seizure unreasonably created the need to use such force. In Judge Garcia's view, the late-night visit at the wrong house that resulted in Dotson's death did not amount to such recklessness. And he's not alone in concluding that police cannot reasonably be expected to make sure they're in the right place when they approach or even break into somebody's home. But despite Judge Garcia's ruling, the Dotson family can still pursue claims under the state constitution and the New Mexico Tort Claims Act. Like this video, share this video, and leave your thoughts about this in the comments section below. I'll see you in the next video.